Hello, my name is Leighton Hellander, and this is my video submission for our worship reflection project. This is my experience visiting St. Mary's Cathedral in Minneapolis and watching the Divine Liturgy service on Sunday, April 26th. They began with the Lord's Prayer, and this was sung by the priest. It was sung by the entire congregation, and then the ending part of Thine be the kingdom, thine be the glory forever and ever, that part was sung by just the priest. So that's how the service started. It was my first time ever being to a Greek Orthodox service, so I didn't know what to expect. It turns out you have to have everything memorized. It was a lot of reciting and a lot of chanting and a lot of call and response. So I think you have to be a consistent attender since childhood to know how to participate fully. So that's kind of what I want to get into. I'll go over the rest of the order of the service and then talk about like the length of service, the fourfold project or model. I'll talk about how that fits in there through the scripture usage and the music and the table and the sending, all of those parts. I'll just continue on throughout the rest of the order of the service, but there's a lot, so I might skip over a few things, but I have extensive notes from the service, but not all of it I can talk about probably fully in the video. So they would continue on after that. They would read out of the Psalms, specifically Psalm 38 is the one that I recognized. It was about feeling abandoned, but still having joy in the Lord. So it was a sort of a lament, but then praise, and lament and praise, that sort of thing. And a lot of this was sung by just the priest. And then the congregation would join in a chorus of Alleluias after the priest finished, which I thought was so cool. Honestly, this place, everybody there was an amazing singer. It was kind of intimidating. It sounded so beautiful. It was like a choir, but more psalms were read, and as the psalms were being read, the people entering in through the back, the people that were just arriving at this point, would come up to the front and bow at the altar, and then there were 4 pictures of saints up front, and the people would go and bow at each one. So it was very, I want to say theatrical, but that's probably not the right word, but it was very, very cool, very interesting. They would say a lot of call and response prayers like, the Lord have mercy. So the priest would say something, and then the congregation would respond with, Lord have mercy. The priest would say something, congregation would say, Lord have mercy. And that continued for a while. And then another one where the priest would say something and everyone in the congregation would join in with, blessed be he who comes in the name of the Lord. While this was happening, the priest would walk around the room with an incense ball, and he was swinging it around, so that was cool. I'm going to move on to the next part. They started getting into some of the scripture. The main theme of this particular service was out of Mark, and it was a revelation of Jesus after his resurrection. So they read out of that, and in between, they would have more singing and more prayers. Just for time's sake, we'll skip through this. At about 1.5 hours in, the Bible was finally brought out, this giant Bible, and the priest walked it around the room while singing, and the people, I can't remember if they bowed to it, but they watched in reverence. And then after that, more scriptures were read, out of Mark specifically. It was talking about the 2 Marys showing up to the tomb and finding out that Jesus' body was not there, and they saw the angel. So that was how the sermon started. And then the rest of the sermon went into the people that made the burial possible. So Joseph and Mary, the 2 Marys, and Nicodemus. And then they talked about the deniers. So it was talking about how Jesus' burial was possible, with the donation of the tomb, and with the Passover, they had to remove the body from the cross before, and then talking about the deniers and how their unbelief and like maybe they went to the wrong tomb and the priest kind of went into like that was impossible because the women knew where Jesus was buried, which is really interesting. And the point he really wanted to get across is that we need to have passion about what we're reading, or we're not going to understand and we're not going to care. So yeah, it was very short. It was about 25 to 30 minutes, I want to say, was the like actual sermon part, and then they continued on to more singing. So it was a lot of singing, a lot of musical worship, and liturgical prayers, that sort of thing. So far they had the gathering and the word, very prevalent. They never had anything for the table at this particular service. They did not do communion. But what was interesting about the sending to me is as the priest sent people out of the service, they would walk around in a line, and up front a deacon was holding a cross, and the people would come up and kiss it. And I just thought that was really, really weird, but really cool. Now I just want to talk about like the little details, like the architecture. Up front there was this giant altar, and it was so cool, and it had 2 doors on the sides, and they had pictures of saints when the doors would close, but when they were open, you could see into the back. And then a main entrance in the front where the priest would go in and out, and that's where the Bible was brought through. So it was very beautiful, very classical architecture. And this was also just a very formal event for people. It was not a laid back event. Everybody was dressed in their Sunday best. So that was very cool. And the priests had robes on, and the, I don't know what you call it, but the hat. It was just very cool. It was very, very formal. So yeah, that was my experience at the Greek Orthodox Divine Liturgy. Thank you. I forgot to mention that the service was just over 3 hours long. And like I said, an hour and a half in is when the sermon actually started. So very long service. The sermon was only like 30 minutes.